You're lying on your back, staring up at the night sky. The stars are scattered like glitter across black velvet. Maybe you're on a rooftop, maybe a beach, or maybe just outside your house. The air is quiet. The world feels still. And then a strange thought creeps in. Not just how big the universe is, or how far the stars are, but something deeper. A question that hits you right in the chest and makes everything else feel like a mystery. Why is there anything here at all? Why is there something rather than nothing? Not just why planets and galaxies exist, not just why people and cats and cups of coffee exist, but why there is anything, space, time, energy, light, atoms, instead of absolutely nothing. No sound, no darkness, no empty space, just nothing, no thing. At first, it sounds like a silly question. Like, of course stuff exists. We're here, after all. You're listening to this. But if you stop and really think about it, the weirdness sinks in. Because it didn't have to be this way. There could have been nothing, not even the chance of something. And yet, here we are. That's what makes this one of the deepest and strangest questions in all of philosophy. Let's try to bring this a little closer to home. Picture this. You walk into your bedroom and you see a cake sitting on your bed. No note, no box, no person in sight. Just a perfectly frosted chocolate cake in the middle of your sheets. What's your first reaction? You don't say, well, I guess cakes just appear on beds sometimes. No, you ask, where did this come from? Who brought it? Why is it here? Because we instinctively believe that things don't just pop into existence for no reason. Now imagine someone tells you, that cake didn't come from anywhere. It's just always been there. You probably give them a long stare and start checking for hidden cameras. Because something so specific and detailed, something that could have not existed, makes us think there must be an explanation. Now stretch that feeling out, not just for a cake, but for the entire universe. Why does it exist? Why is there something instead of absolutely nothing? This question touches something very deep in all of us. Because if we knew why everything exists, maybe we'd understand our own place better too. Maybe we'd understand if there's a purpose to it all, or if the universe is just a random burst of cosmic noise. It affects how we see meaning, how we deal with death, how we raise our kids, how we dream. It's not just about physics, it's personal. So, what have people said about it? The philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, back in the 1700s, was one of the first to ask this question in such a clear and direct way. He believed that the universe must have a reason for existing, and that reason couldn't come from within the universe itself. It had to come from something outside of it, something necessary, something that could not exist. For Leibniz, that ultimate explanation was God. Other thinkers, like the 20th century philosopher Bertrand Russell, disagreed. Russell famously said, "The universe is just there, and that's all." He didn't think there had to be a reason for existence. To him, asking why there's something rather than nothing was like asking why the number 5 exists, or why Mondays exist. Maybe it's just part of the fabric of reality. No explanation needed. Then there's the idea from modern physics that maybe nothing isn't so simple. What we think of as empty space, total nothingness, might still contain quantum fields, or the potential for particles to pop in and out of existence. So in that view, the universe could have sprung from a kind of unstable nothing. But this leads to a new question. Where did that quantum nothing come from? We keep peeling the onion, but every layer reveals another mystery underneath. Some religious traditions say that creation came from a divine being, that God made the universe freely, out of love or purpose or will. Others say that asking why the universe exists is like asking why a rock is heavy. It's just in its nature. It simply is. And some people say we might never know, or that the question might not even make sense the way we're asking it. Like trying to measure the weight of an emotion. It could be the wrong tool for the job. But even if we can't answer it, this question lingers because it reveals something about us. We are creatures who ask, who wonder, who look up at the stars or down at a blade of grass and think, how did this all begin? Why does it exist at all? Maybe we're not supposed to have a final answer. Maybe the value of the question lies in what it stirs inside us, a sense of wonder, a reminder that the world didn't have to be here, and neither did we. And yet, here we are, breathing, thinking, asking. So the next time you feel like everything's just ordinary, pause for a moment. Look around, the air, the sounds, the colours, the people in your life. None of it is guaranteed. All of it could have been nothing, and yet, somehow, it's something. And maybe the most powerful question you can ask is not just, why is there something? But now that there is something, what do I do with it? You're lying awake at 3 a.m, eyes open in the dark. And for some reason your brain starts whispering questions. Not just any questions, but those questions. The ones with no easy answers. Maybe it starts small. What should I do tomorrow? Then it grows. What am I doing with my life? And before you know it, you're staring at the ceiling, asking the biggest question of all. What is the meaning of life? It hits like a wave, quiet but powerful. Why are we here? What's the point of all this? Is life about being happy? Is it about helping others? Building something that lasts? Or is it just about survival until we run out of time? This question has haunted people for as long as we've been able to think. It's written into ancient scrolls, carved into stone, whispered in poems, and now it floats around on the internet in memes and podcasts. It's a question that keeps us up at night, and yet it's also the one we often avoid during the day. Why? Maybe because we're afraid there isn't an answer. Or maybe, just maybe, we're afraid there is one. Let's put it this way. Imagine your life is a movie. You're the main character. There are moments of triumph, heartbreak, laughter, awkward silence, and background music when you look out a window on a rainy day. But what kind of movie is it? A comedy, a drama, a documentary, a blooper reel. And more importantly, what is it about? If someone watched the whole thing from beginning to end, what would they say it meant? This is the heart of the question. Not just, what is the meaning of life? But what is the meaning of my life? Because meaning isn't just a label we slap on the universe. It's a feeling, a sense that what we do matters, that we're part of something bigger than a daily to-do list. And we do search for it. In careers, in love, in family, in hobbies, in religion, in stories we tell ourselves. We look for clues, like detectives of existence, trying to connect dots in the chaos. We look for signs, for moments that make us say, this means something. The idea of meaning is everywhere, even in small things. Think of a cup of coffee. On its own, it's just a drink. But if you're sharing it with someone you love on a quiet morning, it becomes something else. It becomes a memory, a moment of peace, a thread in the bigger tapestry of your life. That's meaning, not something you find written in the sky, but something you feel in the pit of your chest. But why does this question matter so much to us? Maybe because we're the only creatures who seem to ask it. Dogs don't question the point of fetch. Trees don't wonder what they're doing with their bark. But we, humans, stare at the stars and wonder if we were meant to be something more. This question shapes how we live. If we believe life is about success, we chase achievements. If we think it's about love, we pour our energy into relationships. If we believe there's no meaning at all, we might feel free, or we might feel lost. That's the tricky part. The meaning we assign to life often shapes the way we experience it. People throughout history have tackled this question in wildly different ways. The ancient Greeks thought about it deeply. Aristotle said the purpose of life is to reach a state of flourishing, or eudaimonia. Not just feeling good, but being good. Living with reason, virtue, and balance. Thousands of years later, existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus flipped the script. They said life has no meaning unless we give it one. Camus compared life to pushing a boulder up a hill over and over again. Sounds bleak, right? But he said there's power in choosing to keep going anyway. That even in a meaningless universe, we can find meaning in the act of living itself. Religions offer other answers. Christianity speaks of divine purpose and love. Buddhism teaches that life is a path to enlightenment, freedom from suffering. Islam, Hinduism, Judaism. They all explore meaning through different lenses, but they agree on one thing. This question matters. Some scientists say we're just an accident of physics, a side effect of molecules bouncing around in a very lucky way. But even many scientists admit there's something strange about how much we care. Why would a bunch of carbon atoms be so deeply obsessed with purpose? Maybe that's the most human thing of all. So where does that leave us? Is life a test, a journey, a joke, a gift? Here's the truth. No one has the final answer, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the question isn't meant to be answered once and for all, but to be lived. Maybe meaning isn't something you find lying on the ground like a coin. Maybe it's something you build, one choice at a time, through kindness, through courage, through paying attention when it's easier to scroll past, through loving someone deeply, even though you know nothing lasts forever. What if the real meaning of life is not a sentence, but a story? And what if it's a story you get to write? So, the next time you're staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning and your brain whispers that ancient question, what is the meaning of life? Maybe you can whisper something back. Maybe you can say, I don't know yet, but I'm working on it. And maybe that's the answer. Or maybe the real question is, what kind of meaning will you choose to create? You're standing in front of the fridge, staring blankly at a row of leftovers. Spaghetti from last night, half a cheeseburger, or maybe just grab a banana and go. You reach out, hesitate, then close the door and grab a cup of water instead. Simple, right? You made a choice. But what if you didn't? What if that moment, your decision to drink water instead of eating anything, was already set in motion by events long before you even opened the fridge? The genes you inherited, the childhood habits you learned, the chemicals in your brain, the weather outside, the exact way your neurons fired. What if everything you do, even the things you think are your own decisions, were always going to happen exactly the way they did? This brings us to one of the oldest and most mind-bending questions in all of philosophy. Do we actually have free will? Or is everything in our lives already determined? Free will is the idea that you can choose, that you could have done otherwise. You could have eaten the spaghetti instead of walking away. You could quit your job tomorrow, or move to a different city. You could stay up all night watching cat videos or go to bed early for once. Free will means that your decisions are your own, not forced on you by fate, physics, or brain chemistry. But determinism throws a wrench into that. It says that everything that happens has a cause, and that cause has a cause, and that cause has another cause before it, like a giant chain of dominoes going back to the beginning of the universe. Under strict determinism, the Big Bang set everything in motion, from the explosion of the first star to your decision to wear socks with pineapples on them today. Every choice you make was already baked into the cake. Let's take a more down-to-earth example. Think about a vending machine. You press the button for orange soda and out it comes. No surprise. The machine responds the same way every time. But now imagine someone watching you from far away, with access to every detail about your brain, your past, your mood, the temperature, your recent diet, even your last conversation. Could they predict your actions the way we predict the machine? If they could, would that mean your choices were never really yours? Now this might sound like something only philosophers worry about when they've had too much coffee, but it matters. It really matters, because the way we answer this question changes how we see ourselves and each other. If we have free will, then we are responsible for what we do. Our choices define us. If someone commits a crime, we hold them accountable because we believe they could have chosen not to. If we overcome hardship, we feel proud because we believe we made that happen through effort and determination. But if everything is determined, then what happens to blame, or praise, or guilt? If you snap at your friend because you're tired and hungry, and your brain is overloaded, is that really your fault? And if someone wins a gold medal, but only because of years of training that was shaped by their upbringing and opportunities, is that totally their success? Some scientists argue that free will is an illusion, that the brain makes decisions before we even realize it. In some experiments, people were hooked up to brain scanners and asked to press a button whenever they felt like it. The machine could often predict which button they would press a few seconds before they consciously made the decision. That sounds creepy, right? Like your brain knows what you're going to do before you do. But not everyone agrees. Many philosophers argue that even if our actions are influenced by outside forces, that doesn't mean we have no freedom. Maybe free will is not about being completely separate from the world, but about being able to reflect, think, and choose based on who we are and what we value. Even if we are shaped by our past, maybe we can still be the authors of our lives. Let's bring in a few big names. One of the most famous philosophers on this topic was a guy named David Hume. He thought that free will and determinism could actually work together, that even if our actions are caused by things like personality or habits, we are still free if we act in line with who we are. He called this compatibilism. Then there's Immanuel Kant. He argued that we have to assume we have free will, not because we can prove it, but because moral responsibility depends on it. If we didn't have freedom, then praising courage or blaming cruelty wouldn't make sense. On the flip side, there's Baruch Spinoza. He said that people think they're free, like a stone flying through the air thinking it chose to fly. But really, we're all just part of the unfolding of nature. We are causes and effects in a vast, interconnected universe. And today, some neuroscientists like Sam Harris argue that while it feels like we have free will, it's really just the brain doing its thing behind the scenes. You don't choose your thoughts, they just appear. You don't choose your desires, you discover them. So how can you say you're in control? But others argue that those scientists are misunderstanding what free will really is. It's not about choosing in a vacuum. It's about being able to reason, to pause, to weigh your options. Even if your brain is involved, you are still the one thinking. After all, your brain is you. So where does that leave us? Are we just dominoes falling in a long cosmic chain? Or are we more like jazz musicians, working within structure, but improvising our own tune as we go? Maybe we are both. Maybe we are shaped by forces we can't control. Our biology, our environment, our culture. But within that, we still have space to respond, reflect, and create meaning. Maybe freedom is not about total independence, but about being able to grow and change, even within limits. So the next time you're choosing between pizza or salad, or debating whether to call an old friend, or wondering why you keep making the same mistake, remember this question: are you choosing, or are you being carried? And if we are being carried, can we still steer, even just a little? What do you think? Is your life a story you're writing, or a script you're following without knowing the ending? You're sitting alone at night, long after everyone else has gone to bed. The world is quiet. There's no phone buzzing, no noise outside, just stillness. You look up and see the stars, tiny lights scattered across a huge sky. They seem endless, and suddenly a thought creeps in. Something ancient, something almost too big to say out loud. Is someone out there? Is there a purpose behind all of this? Does God exist? That's the question we're exploring today. It's one of the oldest questions humans have ever asked, and it's also one of the most personal. Some people feel absolutely sure they know the answer, others aren't so sure. And many of us live somewhere in between, curious but uncertain. The question is simple: does God exist? But the answers are anything but simple. They've been debated for thousands of years, across continents, cultures, and beliefs. Why does this question matter? Well, think about it. If God exists, that could mean life has a deeper purpose, that we're not alone, that there's meaning to our joys, our struggles, even our suffering. On the other hand, if God does not exist, that raises different kinds of questions. What do we do with our brief time here? What gives life value? What guides us? This is not just a puzzle for philosophers. It's a question that shapes how people live, love, grieve, and hope. So let's try to get a handle on it, not by trying to prove or disprove anything, but by thinking together, slowly, clearly, like two friends just talking. Let's say you walk into your kitchen and smell cookies baking. You didn't bake them. You didn't hear anyone else in the house. But the smell is there. It fills the air, warm and sweet. You look around. There are no cookies in sight. The oven is off. But that smell, it's real. So you ask, where did it come from? Maybe someone was here before. Maybe there's a bakery down the street and the scent drifted in through the window. Or maybe you're just imagining it. But the smell gets you thinking. Something must have caused it. This is kind of how some people think about God. They look at the world and say, all of this, life, love, beauty, even the laws of physics, it's like the smell of cookies. Something must have caused it. That idea is called the argument from design. Thinkers like William Paley said that just like a watch implies a watchmaker, the complexity of the world suggests a designer. But others see things differently. They point out that nature can build things slowly over time without anyone directing it. Evolution, for example, explains how life developed through natural processes. Maybe the universe doesn't need a cause in the way we think it does. Philosopher David Hume was skeptical of design arguments. He said we often see patterns where there aren't any, just because our minds like order. Still, the question doesn't go away. Some people believe in God because of personal experiences. They feel a presence when they pray, or see something that feels too perfect to be random. Others believe because of their upbringing or community, their culture, their family, their rituals. All of it connects them to something greater. Then there are people who struggle to believe, even if they want to. They might say, if God exists, why is there so much suffering? Why do innocent people suffer? Why do bad things happen to good people? This is known as the problem of evil, and it's been one of the strongest challenges to belief in a good, powerful God. Thinkers like Epicurus and more recently, people like Richard Dawkins have argued that if God allows evil, maybe God doesn't exist, or isn't what we think. Others respond by saying that suffering can have meaning, even if we don't see it right away. Some say free will, the ability to choose, means that people can do good or bad, and that this freedom is worth the risk. Some say suffering brings growth or reveals deeper truths. Thinkers like C.S. Lewis believed that pain was not a sign of God's absence, but a part of how we learn to depend on something greater than ourselves. Then, there are people who don't think the question is even useful. They're not angry or cynical, they just live without needing to answer it. These are often called agnostics or secular humanists. They focus on human experience, on kindness, on what we can know and do here and now. The question of God might be interesting, but for them, it's not necessary to live a good life. And yet, something about the question keeps pulling us back. From ancient cave paintings to giant cathedrals, from tribal chants to modern meditation apps, people have always reached out to something beyond themselves. Whether we call it God, the universe, the divine, or nothing at all, we still feel that pull. We still ask. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once said that every person has a God-shaped hole inside them, something empty that we try to fill. Some fill it with faith, some with love, art, science, or service. Some try to ignore it, but it never quite disappears. So does God exist? We may never have a final answer, but the search itself, the asking, the wondering, the reaching, that's part of what makes us human. It's not just about getting the answer. It's about the journey we take, the people we meet, the moments we feel something bigger than ourselves. Maybe the question is not just, does God exist? But what do I believe about the mystery of life? What do I do with that belief? How do I live with meaning and wonder, whether I think someone is watching or not? You wake up in the morning, your eyes blink open, sunlight creeps through the curtains, and for a moment, you're just there. You're aware of the warm sheets, the birds chirping outside, the heaviness in your body, and maybe a lingering dream slipping away. You don't just exist, you know you exist. You are aware of being you. But what is that awareness exactly? Where does it come from? Why do you have it? And how can something like a brain, made of squishy tissue and electrical signals, create a feeling of being? That's the mystery at the heart of today's question. What is consciousness? On the surface, it seems obvious. Consciousness is being awake, alert, and aware. It's the thing that lets you see the sky and say, wow, that's beautiful, or feel nervous before an exam, or wonder if penguins have thoughts. But when we try to explain how that awareness works, or why it even exists, things get confusing fast. We don't just want to know what it feels like to be conscious. We want to know what it actually is. Is it just brain activity? Is it a soul? Is it something science hasn't figured out yet? Let's try an analogy. Think of your phone. It has hardware, like the screen and the battery, and it has software, the stuff that makes the apps run and gives you a user experience. Now, your brain is a kind of hardware. Neurons fire, signals move, and chemicals flow. But consciousness feels like software, the part that brings everything together into a single experience. Except, unlike a phone, no one has been able to open up the brain and find that software. We don't know where or how the feeling of being aware lives. This is known as the hard problem of consciousness, a phrase made famous by philosopher David Chalmers. He pointed out that even if we understand everything about how the brain works, the way it processes sound, vision, memory, we still wouldn't know why those processes come with the experience of being alive. Why isn't it just lights flickering in the dark? Why does it feel like something to be you? And this matters. Not just to scientists or philosophers. It matters to all of us. Because consciousness is what makes life mean something. Without it, there would be no joy in music, no pain in heartbreak, no curiosity, no stories, no choices. Without consciousness, we're not people. We're machines acting out scripts. So when we ask what consciousness is, we're really asking what it means to be human. There's also something deeply strange about it. You only ever experience life from the inside. You don't see consciousness. You are it. It's the one thing you can't escape, and yet the one thing you can't fully explain. You can talk to others, compare thoughts, share emotions, but you'll never know exactly what it's like to be someone else, even someone close to you. Their world is locked inside their own head, just like yours is. Consciousness is the ultimate private experience. Throughout history, people have tried to explain this mystery in many different ways. The ancient philosopher Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." He believed the mind and the body were two separate things, the physical and the mental. That led to what's called dualism, the idea that consciousness might come from something non-physical, like a soul or spirit. Others, like materialists, argue the opposite. They say consciousness is just what happens when a brain is complex enough, that it's an illusion created by the brain's inner workings, kind of like how a rainbow is just light bending, but it looks real to us. Some even argue that our sense of self is just a story the brain tells itself to keep things organized. In modern science, researchers scan brains, measure neural activity, and build models. But no one has found a definitive answer. Some suggest that consciousness emerges when information is processed in a certain integrated way. Others believe it might exist on a spectrum, not just in humans, but also in animals, or maybe even computers someday. That raises even more questions. Could a machine ever become conscious? If we built an AI that claimed to be self-aware, would we believe it? And what about when consciousness fades? Like when you're in deep sleep, or under anesthesia, or in a coma? Where does it go? Why can it vanish and then return? That tells us something too. Consciousness might not be a thing we can hold. It might be more like a state, a process that can start and stop, like a song being played on an instrument. The instrument is the brain. The song is your awareness. But the song isn't the instrument. What's even more mind-bending is the idea that consciousness might not be something you have, but something you are. You are not a person who has awareness. You are awareness experiencing life through the filter of a person. That's something explored in Eastern philosophies, like Buddhism and Hinduism, where consciousness is seen not as personal, but as universal. According to some of these traditions, your awareness is part of a bigger whole, like a wave that belongs to the ocean. The wave has a shape, a time, and a place, but it's still just ocean in motion. So what is consciousness? Is it a side effect of biology? Is it a secret ingredient of the universe? Is it a story we tell ourselves to feel real? Or is it something sacred, beyond what science can measure? Whatever it is, consciousness is the one thing we all share. Yet the one thing we can never fully give to someone else. It's the window through which we see the world, and the thing that makes us wonder about it in the first place. Maybe the more important question isn't just what is consciousness, but also what are we doing with it? Are we using our awareness to connect, to grow, to understand each other? Or are we letting it drift by in distraction? And so, we end where we began, in that quiet, personal space where thoughts arise, where feelings stir, and where the world comes to life. In you, right now. So the next time you pause and notice your thoughts, ask yourself, who is doing the noticing? And what does that say about you? Have you ever stood at a funeral, quietly listening to the soft hum of people whispering, maybe the distant sound of birds outside or the rustles of leaves in the wind, and thought, where did they go? Not just the person in the casket, but the real them. The part that laughed, that cried, that dreamed and remembered and hugged you tight. We never really say it out loud, but in those moments, one question hangs in the air heavier than the silence itself. What happens after we die? This is one of the oldest, most personal, and most mysterious questions humans have ever asked. What actually happens when we die? Is it just lights out forever? A peaceful sleep with no dreams? Or is there something else? Something beyond? Something more? The reason this question matters so much is because death is the one thing none of us can escape. We might avoid taxes, skip dentist appointments, or reschedule awkward family dinners, but no one has ever managed to skip dying. It happens to everyone, rich or poor, kind or cruel, famous or forgotten. And because it's so universal, it makes sense that we're curious about what, if anything, lies on the other side. To make this question easier to think about, consider this. Have you ever watched a movie you really love, and as the credits start to roll, you're just sitting there, kind of frozen, still holding the popcorn? You're not ready for it to end. You want to stay in that world a little longer. Maybe you wonder what happens to the characters after the final scene. Do they find peace? Do they go on new adventures? Do they even exist beyond what you saw? Our lives are kind of like that movie, and death feels like the end credits. It makes us ask, is that truly the end? Or is there something more after the screen fades to black? This matters because how we answer that question, what we believe about it, can change how we live. If we believe there's nothing after death, we might focus on making the most of this life, loving fiercely, chasing dreams, because this is all we've got. But if we believe in an afterlife, we might live with different hopes, values, or fears. Maybe we try to live well, not just for today, but for something bigger, waiting on the other side. Throughout history, people have given many different answers. Ancient Egyptians believed in an afterlife where your heart was weighed against a feather. If it was lighter, you moved on to paradise. If not, well, let's just say it was not a happy ending. In Hinduism and Buddhism, there's the idea of reincarnation, being born again and again in different forms, depending on how you lived your past lives. Many Christians believe in heaven and hell. Some atheists believe in nothingness, a return to the same kind of non-existence we had before we were born. One famous philosopher, Epicurus, had an interesting take. He argued that we shouldn't fear death at all. He said, "When we exist, death is not, and when death exists, we are not." In other words, if we're not around to experience death, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's just nothing. Then you have someone like Socrates. When he was about to be executed, he told his friends that death was either a dreamless sleep or a chance to meet the great minds who had passed before him. Either way, he said, it was nothing to fear. To him, dying wasn't the end of life. It was just a transition, like walking through a door into another room. On the scientific side, things get trickier. Science can explain how we die, what happens to the body, the brain, the cells, but it struggles to explain what happens to consciousness, that feeling of being you. Neuroscience can track brain activity, but when the brain goes quiet, does the mind disappear? Or is the mind something more than the brain? Some scientists have tried to study near-death experiences. People who have been clinically dead for a short time and then revived often report strange things. Feeling at peace, seeing a light, floating above their bodies. Some describe seeing loved ones or going through a life review. Are these just tricks of the brain under stress? Or glimpses of something real? We don't have a definite answer. But maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe instead of only wondering what happens after we die, we should also ask, what are we doing while we're alive? You see, the mystery of death makes life more precious. If we knew exactly what was going to happen next, we might not value our time the same way. The uncertainty invites us to live more deeply, to be kinder, to make meaning in our days. Think about people you've lost. Whether you believe they've moved on to another world or simply live on in your memory, their lives still affect you. They shaped who you are. Maybe you still talk to them in your head sometimes. Maybe you see a bird or hear a song and it feels like they're saying hello. Even if we don't know where they've gone, their love still lingers. And that's something powerful. The fact that love and memory can outlast death might tell us something. Maybe what we leave behind isn't just dust or data. Maybe it's the impact we had, the kindness we showed, the stories we passed on. So what happens after we die? We don't know for sure, not yet anyway. It might be peace, it might be transformation, it might be nothing, or it might be something our minds can't even imagine. But here's another question. Does not knowing make it less meaningful or more? Does it scare you, or does it push you to live more fully right now? Maybe the real challenge isn't about figuring out death. Maybe it's about figuring out life. What do you want to leave behind? How do you want to be remembered? What kind of story do you want your movie to tell before the credits roll? Because if there is something after, wouldn't it be beautiful to arrive there knowing you lived a life worth remembering? And if there isn't, well, then this moment, this breath, this chance to love and grow, that's all the more incredible. So maybe the better question isn't just what happens after we die, but also, what are we doing while we're alive? And maybe, just maybe, that's the question that really matters. There's a moment we all experience, whether we're arguing with a friend, scrolling through social media, or just lying in bed at night thinking about life. That moment when we ask ourselves, wait, is that really true? You hear something that sounds right, but something feels off. Maybe it's a viral post. Maybe it's a story someone told you. Or maybe it's even something you've believed your whole life. Suddenly you stop and wonder, What if I've been wrong this whole time? That feeling, that little jolt of doubt, is at the heart of one of the biggest questions humanity has ever asked. What is truth? It sounds simple. We all think we know what it means. Truth is what's real. It's what actually happened. It's the facts, right? But here's the twist. The more you try to define truth, the slipperier it becomes. Is truth what can be proven? Is it what everyone agrees on? Or is it something deeper, something personal? Let's break it down. Suppose you and your friend are talking about a movie you both watched. You say it was boring. Your friend says it was a masterpiece. You both saw the same scenes, the same dialogue, the same story. So who's right? Which of you is telling the truth? You might say, well, that's just opinion. Truth is about facts. Okay, fair. So let's look at something factual. Say someone claims the Earth is flat. You'd probably say that's false, because we have satellite images, science, physics, all pointing to a round Earth. That's the truth. But now let's get even trickier. What about memories? You clearly remember your grandmother baking a certain kind of pie every Sunday when you were a kid, but then your cousin swears it never happened. Who's telling the truth? Truth, it turns out, is not always a simple checklist of facts. It's tangled up with perception, memory, emotion, culture, and belief. And that's why this question matters so much. Because if we don't know what truth is, or how to find it, how can we trust anything? Here's a way to think about it. Imagine truth like a window. Ideally, a window lets you see the outside world clearly, but not all windows are the same. Some are foggy, some are tinted, some are even cracked, and every person, every community might be looking through a slightly different window. What they see looks real to them, but it might not be the whole picture. That's where the trouble starts. Because once people disagree on what's true, things can get messy fast. Think about debates in politics, in science, in religion, even in relationships. So much of our conflict doesn't come from disagreement about what we want. It comes from disagreement about what is, about reality itself. And the search for truth isn't just about being right. It's about trust. Trust in others. Trust in ourselves. If we can't tell what's true, how do we make decisions? How do we know who to believe? How do we even know if we're being honest with ourselves? Now, we're not the first to wrestle with this. Philosophers have been asking about truth for thousands of years. Take Socrates, for example. He didn't claim to know the truth. In fact, he went around asking people questions until they realized they didn't know the truth either. His goal wasn't to win arguments. It was to get people to think deeply, to challenge their assumptions, to admit that certainty might be a trap. Then you have Plato, his student, who imagined a group of people trapped in a cave, watching shadows on the wall, believing those shadows were all there was. According to Plato, the truth is like the sunlight outside the cave, real but painful to look at. Reaching it takes effort, it takes courage. Fast forward to the modern era, and you get different views. Some thinkers, like the philosopher William James, said that truth is what works, what helps us make sense of the world and solve problems. Others argued that truth is whatever matches reality, whether we like it or not. In science, truth is often treated as what can be tested, observed, and repeated. But even science knows its limits. Theories change. Evidence gets updated. What was once accepted as true might later be proven wrong. And in everyday life, we all have our own filters. Our culture, our upbringing, even our emotions can shape what we believe is true. That's why two people can hear the same story and walk away with totally different versions of what happened. So where does that leave us? Maybe truth is not just about facts. Maybe it's also about honesty, about being willing to look clearly, even when it's uncomfortable, about asking questions, listening carefully, and recognizing that sometimes we just don't know. Maybe truth is a journey, not a destination. Think about how we grow up. As kids, we believe what we're told. Then we reach a point where we question everything. Eventually, if we're lucky, We start to find a balance. We learn to ask questions, but also to listen. We learn that truth is rarely black and white. It's more like a puzzle with missing pieces, and everyone's holding a different piece. So what do we do with that? How do we live in a world where truth can feel so slippery? Maybe the best we can do is stay curious, stay humble, recognize that being wrong is not a failure, it's part of the process, and remember that sometimes asking what is truth is not just about finding answers, it's about learning how to live with the questions. So the next time you're in a conversation and you find yourself thinking, I know I'm right, pause for a second. Ask yourself, what do I really know? Where did that belief come from? Could there be another piece of the puzzle I haven't seen yet? Because maybe, just maybe, truth is not something we own. Maybe it's something we share, something we build together, one conversation at a time. So, what do you think? Is truth something we can ever fully know? Or is it something we're always reaching for, like a star in the distance? You're lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling. The room is dark, quiet, still. You start thinking about tomorrow, your plans, your worries, the people you'll see, the choices you'll make. And just for a moment, a strange thought pops into your head. How do I even know that tomorrow will come? In fact, how do I know anything at all? That the world around me is real. That the people I love actually exist. That my memories are true. It feels like the ground beneath your thoughts has a crack in it, and through that crack slips a question that is as ancient as it is unsettling. Can we really know anything for certain? This question might sound like something only philosophers or movie characters would ask, but think about it. Every decision we make, every belief we hold, every opinion we form, it all depends on what we think we know. And yet, if we look closely, even our most basic beliefs can be shaken. You trust your senses, but they've been wrong before. You trust your memories, but memories can be fuzzy or false. You trust logic, but what if your reasoning is flawed in ways you can't detect? The question of certainty cuts deep, because if we can't be totally sure of what we know, then what are we really standing on? Here's a simple way to understand the problem. Picture a table in your house. You see it, you touch it, you even hear it when you knock on it. Seems real, right? But how do you know it's really there? Your eyes could be tricking you. Your brain could be dreaming. In fact, this moment, your room, your table, your entire life could be part of a dream, a simulation, or a hallucination. Far-fetched? Maybe. But the problem is, there's no obvious way to prove that it's not. You might say, well, I feel it, and it seems real, so that's good enough for me. But feeling and seeming aren't the same as knowing for certain. This is where the question becomes more than just a puzzle. It becomes personal. Because if we admit that we can't be completely sure about things, that changes how we look at the world. It means we have to live with a little bit of doubt. And while that can be scary, it can also be freeing. It reminds us to be humble. It reminds us to listen to others, to question our assumptions, to be curious instead of just confident. The question of certainty isn't just about abstract theory. It shapes how we trust, how we learn, how we grow. When someone disagrees with us, do we get defensive, or do we ask ourselves if we might be wrong? When we remember something painful, do we cling to that version of events, or do we consider the possibility that our memory might be incomplete? These are everyday versions of a very big question. Now let's take a look at some of the people who have wrestled with this question through the ages. The French philosopher René Descartes famously doubted everything: his senses, his memories, even his own body. He wanted to find at least one thing that could not be doubted, and after stripping everything away, he landed on this: I think, therefore I am. In other words, even if he was dreaming or being deceived, the very fact that he was thinking proved that he existed. That was his starting point. But beyond that, still lots of uncertainty. Then there's David Hume, a Scottish philosopher who took things even further. He pointed out that we rely on patterns to make sense of the world. The sun rises every day, so we expect it to rise tomorrow. But, Hume argued, we don't know it will rise. We just believe it will, because it always has. Our minds are wired to expect regularity, but that doesn't guarantee it. For Hume, knowledge was less about certainty and more about habit. We get used to how things work, and we trust that they'll keep working that way. But underneath, there's no solid proof. And then there's the modern thinker Karl Popper, who said that science itself isn't about proving things true. It's about trying to prove them false. In his view, real knowledge isn't about being certain. It's about being open to being wrong. A good theory is one that could be disproven. So instead of chasing certainty, Popper suggested we should chase ideas that can be tested and challenged. That way, we keep growing and learning, not because we're sure, but because we're willing to be surprised. So where does that leave us? Are we just floating in a sea of uncertainty, with nothing to hold on to? Not exactly. While perfect certainty might be out of reach, that doesn't mean we know nothing. It just means that knowledge is often about degrees, not absolutes. We might not be totally sure that gravity will keep working tomorrow, but we have very good reason to trust that it will. We might not be able to prove that our memories are always correct, but they're reliable enough to live by. Certainty might be rare, but confidence, earned, tested, humble confidence, is still possible. Maybe the key is to stop chasing total certainty and start embracing thoughtful doubt. Not the kind of doubt that paralyzes us or makes us cynical, but the kind that keeps us honest, the kind that makes us ask better questions, look closer, and keep our minds open. Because in a world where we might not know anything for sure, the most powerful thing we can do is keep learning anyway. So next time you're lying awake at night, wondering if any of this is real, you're not alone. That question has haunted minds for thousands of years, and maybe it always will. But maybe that's not a problem. It's a gift. Because the moment we stop pretending that we have all the answers is the moment we start asking the questions that matter most. What if the real strength of our minds isn't in being certain, but in being curious, even when we're not? There's a quiet moment that sometimes catches us off guard. It might happen when we're lying in bed after a long day, staring at the ceiling with the lights off, or when we're scrolling through social media and suddenly feel this strange emptiness, or even when we hit a major life goal, graduate, get a job, move into a new place, and then feel odd. Not bad exactly, but not as full as we expected. And in those moments, a small voice whispers the question, is this it? Is this what life is supposed to feel like? That's where the big question sneaks in, the one people have been asking for thousands of years. What is a good life? Not just a successful life or a comfortable life, but a good one. What does that even mean? Is it about happiness, purpose, money, friends, fame, peace, adventure? How do we know if we're actually living it? This question matters more than it seems, because how you define a good life shapes the choices you make every day. It's the reason someone quits a high-paying job to become a teacher. It's why people travel the world, start families, build businesses, meditate in silence, or risk everything for a cause. It's the compass behind every yes and no we say. Let's try to make this a little clearer. Picture life like a video game. You're the main character. You've got a limited amount of time, and you don't get to know how many levels are left. The game doesn't come with clear instructions, and everyone seems to be playing it differently. Some people are collecting coins, others are helping NPCs, some are unlocking cool gear, and a few are just staring at the sky. If you don't know what the goal is, it's easy to feel lost. That's why this question is so important. What does winning even look like? The search for the good life touches something deep in all of us. We want to feel that our time here means something, that we didn't just pass through, going from task to task, paycheck to paycheck, scrolling endlessly without direction. Whether we admit it or not, we want to live well, not just survive, Not just get by, but live with a kind of richness that makes us feel full inside. People have given very different answers to what this looks like. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle believed the good life was about something he called eudaimonia. It's often translated as flourishing. To him, it wasn't about just feeling good or being rich, but about fulfilling your potential as a human being. He thought a good life was one where you develop virtues like courage, honesty, and wisdom. Basically, becoming the best version of yourself through your actions and choices. Then there's Epicurus, another Greek philosopher, who said the good life is about pleasure, but not in the way people usually think. He wasn't talking about endless parties or indulgence. He believed real pleasure comes from simple things: friendship, peace of mind, freedom from pain, a garden, some bread, a quiet place to think. For him, the good life was about reducing fear and desire so we could enjoy life without being constantly restless. Much later, people like Immanuel Kant argued that the good life is a moral life, that being good is more important than feeling good, living according to a sense of duty, doing what's right because it's right, not just because it benefits you. And in more modern times, thinkers like Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of a concentration camp, said that the good life is found in meaning. Even in suffering, if we can find meaning in what we go through, we can still live fully. These ideas offer different paths. Some say chase happiness, others say chase virtue, some say chase meaning, some say help others. And many of us end up trying to juggle all of them, which can be confusing, because real life doesn't always give us clear answers. You might make a choice that feels morally right, but makes you unhappy, or chase success and still feel empty, or find love but lose your sense of self. It's not always easy to know what the good thing to do is. And on top of all this, society keeps whispering different messages. Ads tell us the good life is about having the newest phone, the nicest clothes, the best body. Schools often tell us it's about grades and careers. Social media shows us pictures of perfect vacations, relationships, and lifestyles. It can feel like we're constantly being pulled in every direction, unsure which version of life is actually worth living. But maybe part of the answer lies in asking the question for ourselves, not just copying what others say, but stopping to reflect. What makes you feel alive? What gives you peace? What kind of person do you want to be? When you imagine yourself old, looking back, what would make you feel proud? What would make you feel like your life had depth, not just surface? Sometimes the answer isn't found in a big revelation, but in the small moments. Laughing with friends, helping someone who didn't expect it, learning something new, watching the sunset and realizing you're here, alive, breathing, and that somehow this moment is enough. It's okay if you don't have a final answer. Most people don't. Maybe that's what makes the question beautiful. It's not a math problem to solve, but a path we keep walking. And the more we ask it, the more awake we become to the life we're actually living. So let me leave you with this. If someone handed you a blank canvas and said, "This is your one shot at a life. You can fill it however you want," what would you paint? What colors would you choose? What would be at the center? What would you leave out? What to you makes a life truly good? You are walking down the street and you see someone drop their wallet. You pick it up. It's packed with cash, cards, and even a photo of their family. There's no one else around, no cameras, no witnesses. In that moment, a small voice inside you asks, "What should I do?" Another voice answers, "Well, that depends, but depends on what exactly?" This simple scenario opens the door to one of the biggest and oldest questions in philosophy. Is morality objective or subjective? In other words, are some things right or wrong, no matter what anyone thinks? Or do right and wrong depend on personal beliefs, culture, or feelings? This question is more than a mental game. It shapes how we judge others, how we make laws, how we raise children, and even how we see ourselves. Whether we believe morality is like gravity, unchanging and universal, or more like taste in music, personal and flexible, affects every part of how we live. Let's break this down with something more familiar. Think about pineapple on pizza. Some people say it's delicious, others say it's a crime. But no one's going to prison over it. It's just a matter of taste. Now think about something more serious, like hurting someone on purpose. Most of us feel that's wrong, full stop. Not just, I don't like it, but it is wrong. So is that second example more than just opinion? Is there something deeper at work? This is where the question really starts to matter. If morality is objective, then certain things are right or wrong, no matter what people believe. Like 2 plus 2 always being 4, or water always boiling at 100 degrees under standard conditions. Murder, slavery, stealing, they would be wrong everywhere, at every time, even if people once thought they were right. But if morality is subjective, then things are only right or wrong, depending on personal views or social customs. What's wrong in one culture might be fine in another. Think about how different societies have treated women, children, animals, or the environment. If those were just preferences, then there's no solid ground to say that one society is better than another, and that can feel uncomfortable, or even dangerous. Still, there's another side to this. If we say morality is totally objective, we run into another problem. Who decides what that objective morality is, and how do we know if they are right? History is full of people who claim to have the moral high ground, from religious leaders to political revolutions, and yet cause terrible harm. So if morality is objective, but people disagree on what that objective truth is, how do we figure it out? Let's go back to a common experience. Think about being a kid on a playground. You're waiting for your turn on the swing, but someone cuts in line. You feel it in your gut. That's not fair. That feeling of injustice doesn't come from a textbook or a law. It feels deeper, almost universal. Even small children in totally different cultures often react the same way to unfairness. That might suggest something built into us, a moral instinct, something more than just opinion. Psychologists have studied this. Some say our moral sense is partly wired into our brains by evolution. Helping others and avoiding harm made it easier for early humans to survive together, so we evolved to feel guilt, empathy, or outrage. But if that's true, is morality just a useful illusion? Something our brains made up to help the tribe? Or is it real, and evolution just helped us recognize it? Philosophers have taken many sides on this. Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, believed that moral truths exist in the same way that mathematical truths do. Just like the number 3 exists whether you believe in it or not, justice and goodness exist, whether or not anyone agrees with them. He believed we can use reason to discover these truths, even if they are hard to see. On the other hand, thinkers like David Hume argued that morality is more about emotion than reason. He said that when we say something is wrong, we are really just expressing disapproval, like saying, boo, at something we don't like. For Hume, there's no objective moral fact hiding behind our feelings, just strong emotions shaped by our upbringing, society, and instincts. And then there's the middle ground. Some modern thinkers believe morality is neither fully objective nor fully subjective. They say it's intersubjective, shared by many people, shaped by reason, conversation, and empathy. It's not floating in the universe like a law of physics, but it's not just a private taste either. It's more like language or money. We create it together, and because we agree on it, it becomes real and powerful. Why does all this matter? Because how we answer the question shapes our world. If we believe morality is objective, we might feel a strong duty to stand up against injustice, even when it's unpopular or dangerous. We might feel more confident that we're on the side of truth, but we might also become rigid, thinking there is only one right answer to every moral question. If we believe morality is subjective, we might be more tolerant of differences and less quick to judge others, but we might also struggle to draw firm lines. Is anything really wrong? If someone out there thinks it's right, how do we defend human rights if they're just opinions? The truth is, most of us live somewhere in between. We act like some things are objectively wrong, like cruelty or cheating, but we also make room for differences in taste and culture. We might agree that lying is wrong, but also think that a white lie to protect someone's feelings is sometimes okay. We bend, but we don't want to break. So, when you picked up that wallet, what did you feel? Was there a little voice that said, do the right thing? Was that your culture talking? Your parents? Your instincts? Or something deeper, something universal that says kindness, honesty, and fairness are more than just personal choices? That's the big question. Is morality a fact of the universe, or a story we tell ourselves? And if it is a story, can it still be meaningful, beautiful, and worth living by? Maybe the better question is not just, is morality objective or subjective? But how can we live in a way that makes the world better, no matter where it comes from? What do you think? When you feel something is right or wrong, where do you believe that feeling comes from? Would it still matter if you were the only one who felt it? And if morality really is just a story, what kind of story do you want your life to tell? You're standing in front of a childhood photo. The kid in the picture is grinning, maybe missing a few teeth, probably holding a stuffed animal or wearing a superhero shirt. That was you, or at least it looks like you. But then the question creeps in. Is that really the same person? After all, you don't feel like that kid anymore. You've grown. You've changed your hairstyle, your beliefs, maybe even your name. You've been through heartbreak, joy, stress, and boredom. So what exactly stayed the same? This brings us to one of the biggest and most puzzling questions in all of philosophy. What makes a person the same over time? What holds your identity together from birth to death, through every version of yourself that comes and goes? Are you still the same you were 5 years ago? And what about 10 years from now? Will future you still be you? This question is more than just a brain teaser. It touches something deep in how we understand ourselves. It's the reason we can feel embarrassed about something we did in second grade, or proud of something we achieved last year. It's why we say things like, I need to find myself, or I don't feel like myself anymore. But if we are always changing, physically, emotionally, mentally, then who or what is this self we are holding on to? Let's try to make sense of it with a familiar example. Think about your favorite old backpack, the one you used through all of high school. Over the years, you patched it up. Maybe you changed the straps, replaced the zipper, sewed on a new pocket. At some point, none of the original material was left, but you still called it your backpack. It had been through everything with you. Even if every piece had been replaced, it somehow still felt like the same backpack. This idea is actually a famous thought experiment called the ship of Theseus. In ancient philosophy, it goes like this. Imagine a ship, and over time, every plank of wood gets replaced. Eventually, none of the original parts are left. Is it still the same ship? And if someone collected all the old parts and built a new ship from them, which one would be the real ship of Theseus? It sounds like a riddle, but it mirrors our own lives. Our bodies constantly change. Scientists say that most of the cells in your body are replaced every 7 to 10 years. So the physical you from a decade ago is literally gone. And your personality? That shifts too. You probably don't laugh at the same jokes, have the same fears, or even want the same things you used to. And yet, you still feel like you. So why does this matter? Well, think about how we treat ourselves and others. We hold people accountable for things they did years ago. We feel a sense of loyalty to our past dreams. We save photos, write diaries, make promises, and plan futures, all based on the idea that there is a single thread that ties our past, present, and future together. If we couldn't count on that thread, relationships would get weird. So would legal systems. So would your own memories. Now let's see how some deep thinkers try to tackle this mystery. The philosopher John Locke had one of the most famous ideas. He said that what makes you the same person over time is your memory. If you can remember doing something, then it was you who did it. Memory, according to Locke, is the glue of identity. So if you remember being 5 years old and climbing a mango tree, that means you are the same person as that tree-climbing child. But here's where it gets tricky. What if your memory fades? What if you forget parts of your childhood or misremember them? Are you less you? And what about people with amnesia or Alzheimer's? Do they stop being themselves? That feels uncomfortable to think about. Then came philosopher David Hume, who shook things up. He said, "Brace yourself. There is no permanent self. When we look for the self," he said, "we only find a bunch of thoughts, feelings, and sensations flowing like a river. There is no single thing that stays the same. The idea of a permanent I is just an illusion our minds create, like a movie made from a bunch of still photos." That sounds scary at first, but some Eastern philosophies, like Buddhism, actually agree. They teach that the self is ever-changing, and clinging to the idea of a solid identity causes suffering. Letting go of the idea of a permanent self can actually bring peace. On the other side of the spectrum, modern science weighs in too. Some neuroscientists suggest that the brain builds a story of the self based on memories, habits, and social feedback. It's like your mind is constantly editing and rewriting a biography, and each chapter shapes how you see yourself. There's no fixed character, just an evolving story. But there are still other views. Some people believe the soul is what makes you the same over time. The soul doesn't change, even if your body or memories do. This idea is central in many religions. It says that even if everything else fades, your soul carries your true identity from beginning to end, and maybe even beyond. So where does this leave us? It's tempting to want a clean answer, to say, yes, this is the real me. But maybe part of the beauty of this question is that it doesn't have a clear ending. Maybe what makes you you isn't one thing at all. Maybe it's a mix. Your memories, your choices, your relationships, your values, your body, your feelings, and how all those things weave together through time. And maybe the real magic is that we can feel like the same person, even as we grow and change. Maybe identity isn't something you are, but something you do. Like playing a character in a play that changes costumes, settings, and even dialogue, but is still guided by the same hand. So next time you cringe at an old photo, or feel like you've lost yourself, or wonder who you'll become in the future, remember this. Identity might not be a fixed thing you have to protect. It might be a journey you keep creating, day by day, choice by choice. And now, here's the question I'll leave with you. If you had to pick one thing that makes you, you, what would it be? Is it your memories, your values, your soul, or something else entirely? Think about it, and maybe ask your future self someday. You're standing in a crowded street. Someone stumbles, drops their wallet, and walks away without noticing. You see it lying there on the ground. People are rushing by. No one seems to notice. You reach down, pick it up, and now you have a choice. Do you chase after the person and return it? Or do you slip it into your pocket and walk away? That tiny moment, barely a few seconds, feels small. But in that moment, a very old question comes to life. Are humans naturally good? Or are we born to be selfish and cruel? Do we choose kindness because it's who we are, or because it's expected of us? Deep down, what are we really made of? This question, are humans inherently good or evil, has been around for thousands of years, and it still divides people. Some say we are born good, pure as fresh snow, only to be corrupted by society. Others believe we are selfish by nature, and it's only through rules, education, or fear of punishment that we behave. So who's right? Why does it even matter? Well, let's think about it this way. Imagine you're raising a child. If you believe people are naturally good, you might trust your child to explore freely. believing they'll make kind choices on their own. But if you think people are naturally bad, you might watch their every move, ready to correct, discipline, and shape them carefully before they grow dangerous. What you believe about human nature can affect how you raise a family, how you vote, how you forgive, and even how you treat strangers. To bring it even closer to home, think back to when you were a kid. Maybe there was a time you took the blame for something your sibling did, just to protect them. Or maybe you hid a broken vase and let someone else get scolded. These are small acts, but they hint at something bigger. Are those acts signs of who we really are when no one's watching? Let's take an example from the animal world. If you've ever seen a dog comfort a crying child or a chimp share food with another, you've seen kindness in creatures who don't have laws, schools, or religion. So if animals can be kind without being taught, does that mean goodness is natural? On the flip side, think about how easily people can do terrible things when they feel afraid, angry, or powerful. History is filled with acts of cruelty, wars, betrayals, genocide. Are those simply mistakes and moments of weakness? Or are they proof that humans are dangerous without strict limits? The truth is, this question cuts to the core of how we understand ourselves. It's not just about what we do, it's about who we are when no one is looking. That's why it matters. It shapes how we treat others, how we build our laws, and even how we define justice. Now, this isn't a new debate. Philosophers have wrestled with this question for centuries. One of the earliest voices was Confucius, who believed people have a natural sense of goodness, a kind of moral instinct like a compass that guides us. His follower, Mencius, took it further and argued that people are born like sprouts, naturally leaning toward good, unless something disturbs their growth. But then, there was another Chinese philosopher named Xunzi who saw things differently. He believed people are born with selfish desires, and only through training, rituals, and social structure can we become good. Without guidance, we would follow our raw instincts, and those instincts aren't pretty. In the West, there's a famous philosopher named Thomas Hobbes. He believed that without laws and governments to keep us in check, life would be nasty, brutish, and short. In his view, people are naturally selfish and violent. We only behave because we're afraid of consequences. But then came Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who said the opposite. He believed people are naturally good, but society corrupts us. According to Rousseau, it's cities, politics, and greed that twist our hearts, not nature. Even science has joined the debate. Modern psychologists and neuroscientists have studied babies to look for signs of moral instincts. And believe it or not, babies as young as 6 months old have shown preferences for helping over harming. They seem to recognize fairness and even express discomfort when they see someone treated badly. That's wild. It suggests that something deep inside us already leans toward goodness before we even learn to speak. But there's also evidence for the darker side. In experiments like the famous Stanford prison experiment, people put in positions of power quickly began to act cruelly, even if they weren't bad people to begin with. It's as if the environment can pull evil out of almost anyone. So maybe we're like clay, waiting to be shaped, for better or worse. So where does that leave us? Maybe the real answer is that we're both. We have the potential for incredible kindness and terrible cruelty. We're capable of rescuing strangers, and we're capable of hurting people we love. The difference lies in the choices we make, the experiences we live, and the stories we tell ourselves about what it means to be good. And maybe that's what makes being human so complicated and so interesting. We aren't just one thing, we're a mix, a tangle of instincts, emotions, and thoughts, always struggling between fear and love, anger and compassion, selfishness and generosity. At the end of the day, the question isn't just, are we good or evil? It's what do we choose to be when we have the chance? So next time you're standing on the street and someone drops their wallet, remember, it's not just about whether you pick it up. It's about the kind of person you believe you are. And maybe, just maybe, asking yourself that question is the first step toward answering it. You're walking home late at night. The streetlights cast long shadows, and it's quiet, almost too quiet. Suddenly you see someone sprinting out of a small shop, clutching a bag. An older man stumbles out after them, yelling, "Stop! Thief!" But the runner disappears into the night. You stand there frozen. What do? Call the police? Chase them? Just keep walking. The next day, you hear on the news that the thief was a teenager stealing medicine for his sick little sister because they couldn't afford it. The shopkeeper, furious and heartbroken, demands justice. But what does that mean? Who really deserves what in that situation? This brings us to one of the oldest and most puzzling questions in philosophy. What is justice? Justice is a word we hear all the time. In the news, in courtrooms, in superhero movies. We say we want justice for victims, justice for crimes, justice for everyone. But if you stop and ask someone what justice actually means, you'll get 100 different answers. Some say justice is about fairness. Others say it's about following the law. Some believe it's about giving people what they deserve, good or bad. But who decides what people deserve? And what if what's legal isn't what's fair? That's why the question is so tricky. It sits at the heart of our relationships, our societies, and our sense of right and wrong. To understand justice more clearly, let's think about something much simpler: a playground. Picture a group of kids playing soccer during recess. There's a ball, a few goals drawn in the dirt, and a bunch of energetic children shouting and running around. Then one kid grabs the ball and refuses to share it. "It's mine!" he yells. The others protest. "That's not fair." Now pause. What are they really saying? They're not just mad about the ball. They feel something is wrong with the way the game is being played. The rules, the fairness, the way they take turns. All of that is tied to a child's simple sense of justice. We don't need to teach kids the word justice for them to know when something feels unfair. That sense is already there. And as we grow up, it gets more complicated. It stops being just about who gets the ball and starts becoming about who gets opportunities, who gets punished, who gets heard. Our whole world is filled with systems, governments, schools, courts that try to make things just. But even with all of that, people still argue constantly about what justice really looks like. So why do we care about justice so much? Why does it matter? Because justice is the glue that holds society together. Without it, trust breaks down. People feel unsafe. They stop believing in rules. If a hard-working person sees someone cheat the system and get rewarded, they might ask, "Why should I even try?" On the flip side, if someone makes a small mistake and ends up suffering for it their whole life, others might think, "That could be me." In both cases, we feel that justice has failed, and when that feeling spreads, it changes how we treat each other. It's no longer about helping or supporting one another. It becomes about surviving, protecting, and sometimes even getting revenge. Now, philosophers have been wrestling with the idea of justice for thousands of years. One of the earliest and most famous was Plato, a Greek philosopher from over 2,000 years ago. In his book, The Republic, Plato has a character named Socrates ask, "Is justice simply whatever benefits the stronger party? Or is it something deeper, something tied to harmony, order, and the soul?" Plato believed that justice, at its core, was about everything being in its right place. Just like a well-tuned orchestra, where every instrument plays its part. A just society is one where everyone fulfills their proper role, not by force, but because they understand that it leads to the good of all. But even Plato's ideas have been debated endlessly. After all, who gets to decide what your role should be? Fast forward to modern times, and we get thinkers like John Rawls, a philosopher from the 20th century, who offered a different take. He said, "Imagine you had to design the rules of society without knowing who you'd be in it. You might end up rich, poor, healthy, sick, popular, or alone." Rawls called this the veil of ignorance. He believed that if people made the rules without knowing their place in the world, they would choose fair and just systems. Because no one would want to be stuck on the losing side of unfair rules. But not everyone agrees with rules either. Some believe that justice isn't about fairness, but about freedom. Others think it's about preserving tradition, and still others think it should focus on helping the most vulnerable, even if that means bending the rules. Here's the truth. Justice is not a one-size-fits-all idea. It shifts depending on where you are, who you are, and what values your society holds dear. In some places, justice means strict punishment to maintain order. In others, it means rehabilitation and giving people second chances. Sometimes justice is about remembering painful histories. Other times, it's about imagining a better future. And yet, even with all these differences, we still chase the idea of justice. We feel it in our bones when something is wrong. We see it in protests, in courtrooms, in quiet acts of kindness, and in loud cries for change. It's part of what makes us human, the need to make things right, not just for ourselves, but for others too. So, the next time you hear someone say, "I want justice," ask yourself, what do they mean? What would justice look like in that moment? Would it be punishment, forgiveness, a new law, a heartfelt apology? Maybe justice is not just one thing. Maybe it's a mirror that reflects our deepest hopes about how the world should be. And maybe the better question isn't just what is justice, but also what kind of world are we trying to create when we demand it? You're sitting at the funeral of someone you deeply cared about. The air is thick with silence, broken only by the occasional sniffle or the soft rustle of clothes. You look at the casket and feel something strange. You know their body is there, but it feels like they are not. It is like the person you loved, their smile, their voice, their laugh, their thoughts. All of that is gone, and you cannot help but wonder, where did they go? Were they just a brain in a body? Or is there something more, something that lives on after the body stops working? This is where one of life's oldest questions sneaks in quietly but powerfully. Is there such a thing as the soul? This question has fascinated people for thousands of years. It is not just about what happens after we die, although that is part of it. It is about what we are, at our core. Are we just flesh and bones and neurons firing like sparks in a machine? Or is there something else, something deeper, something invisible and eternal that makes us who we are? Some people call it the soul. Others might call it consciousness, spirit, or essence. But whatever name we give it, the question remains. Is there something in us that cannot be touched, seen, or measured, but still is? Something that makes us, us? Think about your favorite song. Not just the tune, but how it makes you feel. Maybe it brings back memories, or makes your heart ache, or fills you with joy. Now imagine trying to explain that feeling using only science. Just neurons, chemicals, and sound waves. It is possible to describe the mechanics, sure, but that feeling, that inner experience, that is harder to pin down. Some people say that hidden in that mystery is the soul, the part of us that feels, not just functions. Or consider something as simple as falling in love. We know the body goes through changes. Heart rate increases, hormones shift, brain activity lights up like a Christmas tree. But is love just a trick of biology? Or is it evidence of something more, a soul reaching out to connect with another? The question of the soul matters because it changes how we see ourselves and how we treat others. If we believe people have souls, then every person has value that cannot be measured in dollars, test scores, or productivity. It means life has a deeper meaning and death is not just the end. But if we believe there is no soul, then maybe we are just highly evolved animals. And everything about us, our hopes, dreams, fears, and memories, is just chemistry. Thinkers from all over the world have wrestled with this. Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, believed the soul was eternal, that it existed before birth and continued after death. He thought the soul was like a prisoner in the body, waiting to be released into a higher reality. Fast forward a few centuries, and we meet René Descartes, a French philosopher who said, "I think, therefore I am." Descartes believed the soul and the body were separate things. The body could die, but the soul, the part that thinks and knows and experiences, would go on. But not everyone agreed. Some philosophers and scientists argue that what we call the soul is just the brain doing its job. They say consciousness is a byproduct of brain activity, and once the brain stops, so does everything else. From this view, there is no need to imagine a separate soul. We are physical beings, through and through. Still, there are mysteries that keep the question alive. For instance, people who have had near-death experiences often report seeing bright lights, feeling deep peace, or even floating above their bodies. Are these just brain glitches? Or are they glimpses of something more? Nobody knows for sure, but the stories are hard to ignore. Even children wonder about the soul. Have you ever heard a child ask where their pet went after it died? They do not usually say, "Its heart stopped." They ask, "Is it in heaven?" Or, "Can it still see me?" That natural instinct to believe there is something more, something invisible that lingers. Many people carry that feeling all their lives. Movies and books often explore this too. Think of films like Coco or Soul, where characters travel between life and death, searching for meaning, connection, and purpose. These stories hit us deeply because they echo something many of us feel but cannot fully explain. And even beyond religion or philosophy, the soul question shows up in everyday moments. When you comfort a friend, forgive someone who hurt you, or feel overwhelmed by beauty or music or love, are those just emotional reactions? Or are they the movements of a soul? The idea of the soul is not just about what happens after we die. It is about how we live. Do we act like life is sacred? Do we treat others as if they have infinite worth? Do we believe there is more to us than what we can see or touch? So what do you think? Is the soul a real, invisible part of us? Or is it just a poetic way of talking about the mind? Can science ever prove or disprove it? Or is it one of those questions that lives between fact and feeling, between mystery and meaning? Maybe the question itself is part of what makes us human. Maybe asking it is a sign that there is indeed something more inside us, something searching, wondering, hoping. And maybe, just maybe, the soul is not something we have, but something we are. What if everything you know, your memories, your friends, the feel of the wind on your skin, even the screen you're watching this on, was not quite real? What if all of it, every detail, was part of a vast, intricate simulation? Maybe your childhood home, your favourite song, the heartbreak you felt last year. None of it was truly real in the way you think. It felt real. It mattered. But what if it was all data, a digital dream made to feel like life? This brings us to one of the strangest and most mind-bending questions in philosophy today. Do we live in a simulation? In simple terms, is our entire reality something like a video game, created and controlled by someone or something else? A kind of high-tech illusion? The question might sound like science fiction, but surprisingly, it has become a serious topic in both philosophy and science. And the more you think about it, the more unsettling and fascinating it becomes. Let's try to break this down in a way that makes sense. Think about a really good video game. Maybe you've played one that looks almost real. The trees sway in the wind, the shadows move with the sun, the characters react to what you do. Now think about how far games have come in just the last 20 years. Now imagine a future where the graphics and the physics are so advanced that you couldn't tell the difference between the game and real life. You wouldn't just see the game, you could feel it. You could hear the crunch of gravel under your feet. You could smell the rain. You could believe that everything was real because your senses would be fooled. That's basically the idea behind the simulation theory. The philosopher Nick Bostrom popularized it with something called the simulation argument. He didn't say we definitely live in a simulation. What he said was this: if technology keeps advancing, and if people in the future gain the ability to run super realistic simulations of consciousness, like recreating ancestors or entire societies, then it's very likely that many such simulations will exist. And if that happens, there would be far more simulated people than real ones. So, statistically speaking, there's a much greater chance that we are the simulated ones, not the real ones doing the simulating. It's like flipping a coin 100 times and seeing it land on heads 98 times. You might start to suspect the coin isn't normal. If the number of simulated worlds vastly outnumbers real ones, then our chances of being in a real world drop dramatically. But let's bring it back to something more familiar. Have you ever had a dream that felt so real that you didn't know it was a dream until you woke up? In the dream, you accepted everything without question. The sky could be purple, your cat could talk, and you would just go along with it. Only when you woke up did you realize it was all in your head. That's kind of what simulation theory suggests, except in this case, we might not ever wake up. Now, why does this question even matter? Well, if we are living in a simulation, then it changes how we think about our place in the universe. It changes how we think about free will, purpose, and truth. If everything around us is artificial, are we artificial too? Do we have souls? Are we being watched or tested? And who or what is running the simulation? Some people find this idea thrilling. Others find it terrifying. Because if this is a simulation, then what is real? What can we trust? Can we still love, laugh, cry, and hope if we're just digital code? Philosophers have wrestled with similar questions for centuries, even before computers existed. René Descartes, back in the 1600s, asked how we could know anything for sure. He imagined a powerful deceiver, a kind of evil genius, who might be tricking us into believing a fake reality. His conclusion was that the only thing he could be sure of was that he was thinking. That's where the famous line comes from: I think, therefore I am. More recently, films like The Matrix have explored these ideas in powerful ways. In that movie, humans live in a computer-generated world, completely unaware that their lives are an illusion. The movie turned simulation theory into a cultural phenomenon. But the core idea, questioning the nature of reality, has been around for a long time. Some scientists have even tried to look for clues, like, could we detect tiny glitches in the universe, like pixels or repeating patterns that suggest a digital nature? Some researchers have wondered whether certain quantum behaviors, or the limits of the speed of light, might be hints of an underlying code. But so far, there's no clear proof, just a growing pile of interesting questions. Of course, others argue that the simulation theory might be untestable, which means we might never know if it's true or not. And if we can't prove it one way or another, then maybe it's not worth worrying about. After all, if the world feels real to us, then isn't that enough? Still, it's hard not to wonder. If we are simulated, does that mean someone is watching us like a scientist watches ants in a glass box? Or are we part of a complex experiment where our reactions and emotions are being studied? Maybe we are entertainment for some advanced civilization. Or maybe we are just an accident, a side effect of some cosmic simulation they forgot to turn off. And what would it mean if we aren't in a simulation? If this is the real deal, flesh, blood, and atoms all the way down, then we're still left with big questions. Like, why are we here? What is the universe made of? Who or what created everything? The simulation theory doesn't answer those questions, but it does force us to think deeply about what we assume is true, and that can be a powerful thing. So maybe the real point isn't whether we are simulated or not. Maybe the value of this question lies in what it reveals about us, our curiosity, our hunger for truth, our fear of being alone in the dark. Whether this is the base reality or just one of many layers, we are here, thinking, feeling, and wondering. And perhaps that, more than anything, is what makes us real. Now here's a question to take with you. If you found out for sure that this is a simulation, Would you live your life any differently? Or would you keep going, just like before, chasing meaning in a world that may or may not be real?